I mean, it isn't about... my diary isn't a family diary, though later, when Caroline died, I did describe the moment when she died in my diary, because it was so important to me I couldn't put it in. But up to then, it was a political diary, and Caroline, my wife, I met her in Oxford. She came as a student in '48. I met her at Worcester College on the 2nd of August. I was very shy. I didn't propose for 9 days. And I proposed on a seat in Oxford, and I bought it from the town hall later, and it's in front of her grave now. Hers was the most important part of my whole life. On the other hand, the family did suffer. And I wrote a story called The Daddy Shop to tell the children about a very busy daddy who never did anything, never came to the school, never came to... And the children in the daddy shop decided to go and get a new daddy. So they went to the daddy shop and asked for a new daddy who came. He was so bright, he went on everything, he helped them, he helped at home with the washing up. And then on Christmas, they missed the old daddy. So they went back to the daddy shop, and the old daddy was in the back. And they pulled him out again, and they missed him so much, they hugged him. And my wife prohibited me from telling them that story, because it was a way of justifying myself. But at the same time, the story of the daddy shop is one that conveys the pressure that families are on. Actually, it shows that people still like old Labour. I always think the old daddy was old Labour and the new daddy was different. But I won't enter into political considerations. But you see, now take Cherie, for example. I met Cherie through Tony, her father. He said to me once, he said, my daughter's standing for Parliament. Would you like to come and speak for her? So I went along and I put in my diary, I went to Chatham, wherever it was she stood, and she was there with her husband, a lad called Tony. It's the first time I ever met Tony Blair. And I've always had a lot of sympathy for Cherie, and if you read my diary, you'll find a lot of friendly references to her, because she suffered in a way wives do suffer. I suffered terribly. I could always answer back, but she couldn't. I mean, they said the most ghastly things about her. Some of the things they said about me weren't very pleasant. They said I had a secret bank account in the Bahamas, so I did the obvious thing. I wrote to the bank and asked for the money back, and it never arrived. And last week they said I had a farm in Essex, so I've written to Brussels saying, why haven't I had anything from the Common Agricultural Policy? I could live with it. But the things they said were, black sacks of rubbish were collected every day in a Rover car. I know the Kensington Borough Council are Tory and very efficient, but I doubt whether they took my bags away every morning. And the media pressure, well, Alastair knows as much about that as I do, is absolutely horrific. I don't know, you probably got death threats. I got many of them. One man wrote and said, he's going to kill me, and he put his name and address on the letter. And I was a minister, so they sent the police, and he wrote me another letter saying, dear Mr. Benn, will you ask the police to go away? I recognise my last letter to you was in rather bad taste. I thought it was a nice way of describing a death threat. And so this pressure was horrific. And she stood that pressure and made it possible for me to carry on. And absolutely crucial to have that support.
The media has changed fundamentally from what it used to be, and and we talk about the media now as though it is what it was. It's completely different to what it was. And there's no doubt at all that, not just in politics, but when you talk to anybody in sport, I know a lot of people in top levels of sport, anybody in sport, within 10 minutes of a conversation, they will talk about how the media makes their life a lot harder than it used to be. Similarly in business, similarly in showbiz. And then and the media's kind of excuse is always, well, you know, you the politicians, or you the actor, or you the film director, you wanted to use us to kind of get your name on the map, therefore we should be able to kind of do anything that we want to you, which is a pretty facile argument, but it's quite a difficult one to push back on. My point about this thing about sacrifice, which I suppose is what Tony's kind of referring to, the fact that you are kind of making a sacrifice. I mean, I have to say, I think it cuts both ways. I mean, I had some terrible experiences myself and my family, but if I look back now, I've got 3 children one's 20, who's here at Oxford, one's 18 at Manchester, a 13-year-old daughter, and yes, there were parts of it that were really bad for them, but I also think actually it's been a pretty good upbringing in that they've been able to see all sorts of things going on that actually most children don't get the chance to. And I think that's how they see it as well. I hope it's how they see it. And they've come through it pretty strong. And I know that Tony would say the same for his children as well. I mean, Tony talks about death threats. I mean, for example, during the build-up to the Iraq conflict and also the events surrounding the Hutton inquiry, we had demonstrators and media outside our house the whole time. And you know, you have a situation where my daughter, who would then be 9, comes home from school with a group of her school friends, and there are protesters outside the house giving her leaflets of children who've been gassed in Halabja by Saddam Hussein, and saying, when you go inside, will you ask your dad why he's doing that? And when your daughter comes in and says that, you want to go out and just sort of take them apart. But you can't. You've just got to sort of just say, well, actually, you put your head above the parapet, therefore people are going to take pot shots at you. I've had situations with my children, I'm sure Tony has, and I know that other people in public life who they will try to get at you through their children. The whole thing with Tony, for example, I mean, Tony, who I think has always been able, Tony Blair this is, has always been able to, he's always been very good at understanding other people's motives. And I think if you can make an effort to understand other people's motives, you can kind of get through an awful lot more than you think. So he knew that the media and the Tories were trying to get at Cherie and get at his kids and get at me and get at, sometimes it might be Peter Mandelson or Derry Irvine or who else, who were lightning conductors in a way. They were getting at us ultimately as a way of getting at him. He knew that. He was always very understanding of that. That's why I think, I hope it comes through in the book, that Tony was always a very, very good guy to work for, because whereas some people will run a mile when you get into trouble that something you may be partly responsible for yourself because of what you've said or done, whatever it might be, he would kind of understand where they were coming from, why you'd maybe slipped up here and there, and therefore would by and large would stand by you. And I think that's a very important quality in a leader.